In a stroke of genius and cooperation, the scientific research teams behind 3 major orbiting space telescopes embarked on an ambitious project to link themselves together. The brilliant idea was to form a composite overlay of their unique astral feeds. By using computerized alignment of the fixed coordinates, they fused their mutual gaze of the heavens into a super view. The goal was to discover if the sum total of their collected information was greater than the individual parts. It absolutely was. Immediately, the gain in usable data was simply staggering. Each of the telescopes was impressive in its own right, and when their unique capabilities were factored into the ingredient mix, the results were even more remarkable. For over a year, the biggest problem was getting the 3 stubborn teams to agree what to observe next. Once a new focal point was decided upon, a cornucopia of amazing things would follow. One telescope specialized in infrared data, one had a superior radio frequency array, and the other had the greatest optical lens ever created. The TriView, or TV project as it was nicknamed, brought a far greater depth of information than the astronomers dreamed possible. It wasn't until the 3 telescopes fixed their observations on Saturn that things took a peculiarly hazy turn. More specifically, Hyperion, the first irregularly shaped moon ever discovered in our solar system, brought an eerie fascination to the captivated viewers. With a chaotic 21.27-day orbit, its most distinctive feature might have gone undetected forever, had the TV telescopes not witnessed the backside of it when they did. Unique characteristics of its sandy surface created a highly reflective, glass-like sheen unlike any other known astral body. During periods where that side of Hyperion was visible, a perfect reflection of the Earth was witnessed by the amused observers. What merely started as an interesting external portrait of our little blue marble grew in intensity as disturbing new revelations came to light, the first of which was global-wide weather patterns observed on our planet that were yet to take place here. The stunned teams watching the distant feed witnessed massive hurricanes and cyclone systems form in the upper atmosphere, hours before they were visible to meteorologists on Earth. This spectacular view from afar offered a highly unique opportunity to study our planet from a different perspective. There was also great irony that advanced telescopes peering into the vast reaches of outer space for clues about our origins could also offer pertinent insight into our world. Soon these bizarre, clairvoyant observations spread to be more than just weather events. The evolving technology was retrofitted to fixate directly on the surface at the highest possible magnification. Just as the reflected view from Hyperion's shiny surface offered an advance notice of massive storm systems about to pummel the Earth, it also displayed the outcomes of more personal events before they transpired. No one could begin to explain this surreal window into the future, but the results themselves were indisputable. Somehow we were seeing back in time before certain events occurred. With such powerful predestination capabilities came the urgency to use them to prevent unwanted outcomes. Media leaks invariably occurred about the TV project's potential uses. As with anything not fully understood, fear itself was a massive motivator to seize the technology for good. The individual academic organizers tried to maintain creative control of their powerful research tools, but astronomers are universally funded by their respective governments. It wasn't long before all 3 of the telescopes were under the auspices of those who held the power. The unbelievable opportunities to gain prior knowledge of upcoming events were predictably squandered by corrupt, bureaucratic infighting. Then Hyperion's irregular orbit turned its reflective side away, and the sneak preview into future happenings was temporarily unavailable. The Earth was once again in the dark about pivotal occurrences yet to transpire. All anyone could do was wait for the distant moon's mirrored side to flip back toward us. In the interim downtime, the powermongers tried to organize clever ways to utilize the predestination data for full advantages. Should they sell the information to those about to be affected, or should they remain quiet to allow certain advantageous events to transpire? Wars could be avoided. Undesirable regimes could be toppled. Important lives could be saved, and much more significantly, huge piles of money could be accumulated by doing so. It was a win-win endeavor, as far as they could see with their greedy, self-centered motivations. Prior to the bureaucratic takeover, the displaced scientists realized the end was near for their academic projects. They collectively let go of the political tug-of-war and formed a secret, underground network alliance. Their unofficial committee discussed various ways to regain control, or at least prevent the incredible power of Hyperion's mirrored reflection from being misused. The state-controlled organizations had technical engineers working for them, but these officials lacked the necessary expertise to synchronize the process across the board. They could operate the basic machinery, but didn't know how to fine-tune the results. Getting the data was limited to whenever Hyperion's shiny side was facing the Earth, and which side of our planet was facing it at the time. They demanded continuous updates for intermittent events. This lack of consistency frustrated them to no end. They even lobbied to launch a telescope to travel to Saturn so it could record the reflection when Hyperion turned away. One of their advisors had to sheepishly explain to the leader in charge that when Saturn's moon was turned away from the Earth, there would be no reflection of our planet to capture. They were eventually forced to recognize their hopeless technical inadequacies and contact one of the civilian leaders who they had fired and replaced. Dr. Bergstadt wanted no part of their militant power grab, but as a leading member of the secret alliance, he was in a prime position. He agreed to act as a special advisor for them, while secretly working undercover to infiltrate and seize information for the committee. Obviously, he had to prove his worth in recognizable ways to the commanding general, or he would be of no use and dismissed. It was a balancing act. Is there any way we could make computer adjustments and get more real-time intel from the 3 blended telescope feeds? General Houghton barked. We can do more if we know more, he offered shrewdly. Dr. Bergstadt wasn't surprised at all by the question. It was a predictable objective of any military organization which took credit for the academic achievement of others. How can we exploit your groundbreaking work? That was always goal number 1 in these scenarios. He sought to offer positive-sounding but insignificant insight while distracting from more obtainable possibilities. It was feet-dragging 101. If General Houghton realized it was intended to impede their progress at all steps, he would be canned, and the committee wouldn't have a person on the inside any longer. The doctor had to offer some useful seeds in order to promote his credibility. The first thing he suggested was a way to expand the dynamic range of the 3 telescopes. His organization had repeatedly begged government authorities for more equipment and funding, but had been turned down. Now that they themselves seized the research project, funding wouldn't be an issue. His idea benefited the secret committee and their needs in the long run, and it established his usefulness to the general. Over the next 3 reflection cycles, Dr. Bergstadt implemented several more incremental improvements to the state-run science program. He gathered information on the intel gleaned from the telescope feed. Natural disasters were averted. Assassinations were prevented. Regardless of what entity ran the program, it might have been easy to think it was the most important accomplishment of his life. Many of the actions triggered by the reflected feed saved countless lives and greatly benefited mankind, even if it also lined the pockets of corrupt bureaucrats. He temporarily lost sight of his undercover mission. Then one day he realized they were just watching a long-distance feed of the planet like couch potatoes, and then interpreting certain big events before they actually occurred. It bore no resemblance to astronomy or the career vector he proudly embarked upon 20 years earlier. It felt closer to astrology or psychic soothsaying. He hated being a cog in the soulless government machine that had seized control of their exciting project. It renewed his vigor to be a secret agent provocateur. General, aren't you the least bit curious why the reflection from Hyperion shows us things which haven't occurred yet? You might have shrugged your shoulders and decided it doesn't really matter in the end, but just think of how many more capabilities you could gain if you understood where these strange premonitions come from. Well, of course, I wonder, Dr. B. But you could know the truth about such unknowable things. It's on the other side of the solar system. It would take years to get a spacecraft there to investigate. We need better understanding now. That's part of the reason we brought you aboard, Doc. So tell me, why do you think we can see our own future in that moon's shiny reflection? It was a fantastic question, and Dr. Bergstadt was faced with a huge dilemma. Should he come clean about his bizarre, unbelievable theory? He didn't have a ready-made excuse, especially one that wouldn't cause serious issues. In the end, holding in his radical farts was eating him up inside. He had to unburden himself. It was the subconscious reason why he quizzed the general in the first place. It was demanding to be unveiled. This is going to lead to a lot of follow-up questions, but I've weighed these farts out long enough. Here's the thing. I don't believe what we see in the reflection feed of Hyperion is our future at all. I believe it's actually our present we are witnessing. Even with the delay in light reaching our lens, nothing else could explain why we can see things occur in the composite video feed, which haven't occurred yet in our reality. We should be seeing events on Earth as they have already transpired when we look at Hyperion's reflection, not the other way around. It was this troubling conundrum which helped me adjust my perspective and realize the truth. An uncomfortable silence fell over the proceedings as General Houghton and his senior staff members tried to absorb the bombshell Dr. Berg's stat dropped. They all heard his words clearly enough. The pregnant pause was regarding the implications of them. Every individual in attendance grasped what the doctor insinuated to a certain degree, but none were ready to accept such a surreal, dark idea. It was as if he just started speaking in pig Latin. Wait, what? Are you saying humanity is on some sort of cosmic time delay, Doctor? That we aren't in charge of our destinies? Is that what you mean? What, pray tell, would lead you to such a ridiculous hypothesis? The room broke out in sheep-like applause for his pointed criticism, but Nicholas Bergstadt was prepared for the ugly pushback and disbelief. He already experienced many sleepless nights, pondering the potential consequences of suggesting such madness to the esteemed academics and laymen present before him. He'd already shared his incredible theory with the underground scientific community working to undermine the government takeover. Even among those scientific peers, the jarring concept wasn't universally embraced or understood. This new rendition of doom would simply be for the official notification to his employers. Sharing his detailed findings was infinitely bigger, however, than keeping secrets from the man. I have my reasons for what I just said. I've calculated extensively the elapsed time between what we see in Hyperion's reflection versus when it occurs on Earth. Subtracting the amount of time it takes for that light information to reach our telescope lens, I know exactly how much time our existence is delayed. I recognize it might seem preposterous to mankind, the center of the known universe, to suggest we might not be the main characters in our own little cosmic drama, but many others throughout history have been met with significant skepticism too. Copernicus and Galileo experienced similar ideological roadblocks in gaining the unpleasant acceptance for their revelations. Houghton snorted at the egotistical comparison. The good doctor was definitely an esteemed astronomical scholar of his day, and might have been correct about people not accepting those things 500 years ago. But everyone currently alive was well aware of the historical facts, which came from those important pioneers of early science. It was ridiculous to suggest he was somehow comparable to those noted iconic giants. As I was saying, I've made precise calculations on the elapsed time between what we see in the reflection and when it occurs on Earth. I've checked and rechecked my numbers. I've asked my peers to confirm my figures. They are in full agreement. Subtracting the time it takes for us to see the light coming from Hyperion, the remaining time is 3.14159 hours. Does anyone among us know why that number is significant? An engineer raised his hand to respond to the loaded sarcasm. That's the mathematical number for pi, but obviously that's a coincidence. I've had a dozen astrophysicists and savants of mathematics run these numbers, back and forth, up and down. Dr. Bergstadt interrupted tersely. We allowed for the elliptical orbit of Saturn. We allowed for our own orbit. We compensated for the irregular orbit of Hyperion itself. We dutifully factored in processing variables due to normal electronic lag, gravitational fields, and a dozen other relevant things. Do any of you have an idea of the staggering mathematical improbability of these calculations always coming out to be the same 14-digit number? Anyone? In the purest, most literal sense of the phrase, the chances are astronomical. Several moments elapsed as the collection of stuffed suits looked at each other in uncomfortable silence. No one dared dispute Dr. Bergstadt's passionate words themselves, but the idea that our entire existence was somehow on a delayed transmission schedule or programmed by a greater being was impossible to grasp. Why? What could it mean? As a species, we want to believe we are special. The doctor's revelations led to several unclear conclusions, but the end result meant that we aren't as in control of our fragile existence as we thought we are. There are countless examples in nature of physics and mathematics. The general agreed, but even if your calculations are correct, that amazing observation alone doesn't prove this planet is on some deliberately delayed timeline we have no control over. What other proof do you have? I'm glad you've asked, General. I did some very in-depth new research on Hyperion, and I also found this.